Here we go. WTF, fantasy football, Jim Day, and of course, my man Brian absolutely getting it done. Tonight, if you're listening live, we had a little bit of a problem, but here we are. Jim Day just never gives up, never gives up. You're like Jim Valvano.
Well, I'm never going to ever say that.
No, who do you want to be like, Tim Tebow?
I just want to be like Jim Day.
Jim Day. Brian, who is the guy that you can say in life never gives up and has that personification?
The Energizer Bunny. That's our man, Fantasy Taz.
That is the Fantasy Taz, the Energizer Bunny. I'll tell you what, welcome to the show, guys. And, of course, we're going to have a little fact of fiction. We're going to have some news updates. And first to start off with, I went in depth last week on the Survivor Pool on how you just pick the best team. And you know what? It didn't work out last week because the two teams that I would have picked was the Minnesota Vikings, which, of course, I said. And my second pick was actually the Jacksonville Jaguars against the Tennessee Titans. And both them lost, Jim. That's why fantasy football and NFL and survivor pools are what we love, because you never know what's going to happen.
No, absolutely. That's what makes it fun. If we all knew what was going to happen, then this game would be boring as hell.
Brian, how about your fantasy survivor pools? Do you have any survivor pools left?
Well, last week I believe I went with, I think I went with the Minnesota Vikings over the Buffalo Bills, and I would have also just went with no. And then I said, hey, let's go with New England and Detroit. So 0 for 2. So yeah, I'm terrible at this. If I was good to do it this week, looking at everything, you know what? I'm gonna be a homer. I'm gonna take my Eagles over the Titans, even though they've beaten Jacksonville last week.
I'm not in it anymore, but I'll be honest with people. I would just go the Patriots because they're not going 1-3.
Well, that's a bold call considering how badly they've been playing. You know what? Screw it. I lost last week with Minnesota as well. So if I was just picking one game this week, screw it. I'm going with Cleveland to win their second in a row and beat Oakland.
Oh, really? And Jim Day out there. Now, Jim, I'm going to ask you a personal question. For all the people out there that play a little DFS and play a little fantasy, last week I got to give it to the guys over at dailyroto.com. Drew Dinkmeyer and Mike Leone. To be honest with you guys, they wouldn't be part of the Roto Experts if it wasn't for me. I put the whole thing together. And these are two guys I respect in the industry. So they were promoting the shit out of Tyler Boyd. And they promoted so much Tyler Boyd, Jim, that I actually got off him because I thought they were doing such a good job that everybody was going to be on him. And Boyd went off for a long, big day. I got to ask you, Jim, we work with a lot of smart people. How do you go with the advice in the industry? I used to do everything I could to avoid listening to other shows. What do you do with advice you hear in the industry?
No, you got to take a little bit of it. You just add it to the information you have. And again, it's what we tell everybody else, taking as much information in as you can and form your own opinion. You know me, I always form my own opinions anyway.
I do as well. But Jim, I put it like this. If you're buying a house, you shouldn't get more than three. You got to get 3 different prices, right? You got to get 3 different agents involved. And if you're serious about fantasy football, which I think everybody that listens to a podcast, watches a video, can put that in play, you can listen to other people. I used to tell people all the time, listen to other people because you'll never stop listening to me.
I'm a guy, I listen to a lot of different shows out there. I listen to a lot of Sirius. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And then, I read various different websites that I subscribe to. So, over the years, you kind of learn whose advice you trust and, who's a guy in a basement just telling you, whatever he thinks that week. So I kind of look at the guys who they're not like the point chasers. They're not the rah-rah guy doing it for an entertainment purpose. Those are the guys, if they're just trying to be cute and funny, I'm going to shy away from them. Give me the guy who can dig down into the dirt and give me a reason why he's saying something. Give me some facts behind it. That to me is an opinion I'm going to follow more so over, well, hell, he did it last week and, why not? He's got cool uniforms this week. Let's go.
See, I kind of agree with Brian, Jim, to tell you the truth. But not entirely, because I started in this business because I used to listen to a Baseball Prospectus podcast that was great on information, but I couldn't listen to more than 20 minutes without falling asleep, Jim. So I think I need a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I wanted some information, but I also want some personality, some energy, something. Some of these guys.
I need a little bit of both. You know how it works, Jim?
No, I don't know how it works. For some reason, I'm getting an echo, guys. You guys keep talking. Let me figure this out.
I think we're all set. The echo went away. I got it too. Brian, now I want you to have some fun, Brian.
Let's do it, my friend. I got my Bud Light cracked. The Browns won. I'm ready. Let's party.
Now the Browns won. Before we get to we'll move on. We'll stay there. I'll tell you what, Jim. That was one of the most exciting games I've ever watched in the last 2 or 3 years, and it was the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, it was a great game. It was nice to see, and you could definitely see this entire team just energized when Mayfield came on the field. I hate to say that for Taylor because I thought Taylor was a pretty good quarterback, but he just wasn't playing that way this year. So at this point, they had to make that move. I'm glad they did. It almost looked to me like Taylor's injury, maybe like the team said, look, we want to go to Mayfield this week. Give us an easy way out. Fall down, go boo-boo, and let us make the change so it doesn't look like we benched your ass. And that's what it looked like to me. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it looked like.
Brian, I got Tyrod Taylor, and I've done a lot of research. Tyrod Taylor, 2016, 2017 was a top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise. But I put the classification that he's a better fantasy quarterback than he is an NFL quarterback. And the problem is when you do that, it comes to an end.
Yeah, this is all you need to know about Tyrod Taylor. And I say this over and over again. The Buffalo Bills hadn't made the playoffs in 20 years. They made the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback, and they got rid of him. That if you watch that Jacksonville playoff game last year with Buffalo, he was horrendous. He holds onto the ball too long. He doesn't read the field well. And really, he doesn't get that many people involved. People say, oh, he throws a good deep ball. Well, what are the other elements in the offense doing? And we see that in Cleveland where Njoku's died. Callaway, he's getting targets, but he's not really producing when he needs to. This offense is going to explode under Baker Mayfield. It's like a new day has risen in Cleveland. The sun has come out. We're showered in Bud Light. Let's go pick up some Browns and have some fun in fantasy football again.
Everybody's fired up, of course, for the Cleveland Browns now. But we're going to go a little fact or fiction here. Jim, I'll start with you. Ryan Fitzmagic, and he was tragic in the first half, but he was magic in the second half. He will remain the Buccaneers quarterback all season long.
Well, if it was me running the show, absolutely. Let's face it, he gives them a better chance to win, I think. He's going to have some issues like he did in the first half with the 3 interceptions. And I had people already tweet me as soon as that happened. Oh, there it is. The wheels are coming off. Fitzmagic is dead. Get him out of there. He's never going to start again. And he's going to start again. He brought the team back. He didn't get the win, but he brought the team back, gave him a good chance to win. The defense just couldn't stop Pittsburgh when it needed to. So, look, he's playing really good right now. He's getting these guys involved, and this offense is just creating, great plays. Look, this guy, not only is he a gunslinger, but he's completing 70% of his passes so far. So he's also being very good with the ball. I just, at this point, I think if they bring Winston in, and again, I will preface that to say this is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If they bring Winston back in, I think it's a foolish mistake, and I just don't see it for any reason unless Fitz gets hurt.
Yeah, why would they ever even think to bring Winston back in? It's not like you have Aaron Rodgers on the bench, and you're like, oh, we have to get this stud back in the game. Jameis Winston's never proven himself to be anything more than a fairly average NFL quarterback. Why? There should be no rush to get him on the field.
Well, I can answer that, Brian.
Oh, they're paying him.
Well, no, there's a general manager that wants to keep his job to spend a first-round pick on him, right?
I understand that, but if you're winning, that's what fans care about. And right now, they're doing pretty well. So if they keep riding this Fitzmagic train, just ride until the wheels fall off. Don't force the issue. They're going to make a problem where there doesn't need to be one.
I agree with you guys, but you know what? I'm one of the guys that will say it. There are a lot of jackasses in the fantasy football industry, and I read one of the guys saying, oh, Ryan Fitzpatrick he fell apart because I picked him up off the waiver wire. Well, tell me how many other fantasy quarterbacks had 31 points last week, fantasy-wise, Jim?
Yeah, really. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it really wasn't a lot. So, yeah, I agree. People, overreact, go crazy.
Yeah.
They want to think this guy is such a terrible quarterback. There's no way he can withstand. Yet it was just a couple of years ago that he threw for almost 4,000 yards and over 30 TDs, which puts him in the top 12 every year. And right now he's got much better weaponry than he did then. So, look, the guy is a guy who loves to sling it down the field, and now he's got players to do that with. I say go with him. The problem I think they're having is that many people consider what's his face to be the franchise QB there, Winston. Yeah, to be the franchise QB there, and I'm not sure the team does anymore.
Brian,
he's not the leader that they want him to be.
Brian, today's NFL is almost like a video game. You have to complete 60% of your passes to be an effective quarterback. The reason being, we've seen all these penalties allowed on hits to quarterbacks. They can stand up there. They don't have to worry to be hit. You got to complete 60% of your passes. Jameis Winston's not one of those guys that completes 60% of his passes.
Yeah, Brian Fitzpatrick has a 124.8 rating right now. He's thrown 11 touchdown passes in 4 games.
Three.
The fact anybody wants to take him off the field is ludicrous. Like, I look at guys, 1,200 yards. What are we talking about here? Of course you're going to play him. We care about stats.
We're also talking about the first quarterback in history to have 3 400-yard passing games in a row. First quarterback ever.
You can't take this guy off the field. Ride him. The fans love it. There's a mojo going with the team. And you gotta keep that going. Look at what Philly had last year, man. The team likes each other. They're having fun. Who cares about this guy stealing crab legs and everything else? Let him go jump off a pier. Like, come on, let's stick with the guy that's winning games.
It's going to be great for everybody, no matter who the Buccaneers quarterback is. And I think a lot of people lose sight because they have no running game. Speaking of teams with no running game, Brian, the Lions have 3 wide receivers in the top 35. We talked about could 2 finish in the top 10 last week. How about this week? Can 3 finish in the top 35, Brian?
Boy, oh boy. I tell you, Marvin Jones finished last year as a top 15 wide receiver in most formats. And that surprised a lot of people. This year, Kenny Golladay is skyrocketing up everyone's, waiver wire columns and into their, top 10 wide receivers. This guy's got 19 receptions for 256 and 2. You think, wow, that's a great number 1. Oh, by the way, Golden Tate has 20 for 257 and a touchdown. These guys are playing out of their minds. So can they keep that pace up? Absolutely. I do think they're going to get a little more of a running game going now with Kerryon Johnson, but I mean, they have no tight end to speak of, and they're going to be in shootouts left and right. So absolutely, I think all 3 of these guys can be productive and stay top 35 options.
Jim, I don't believe in Kerryon Johnson. I believe he's the best running back on the Lions, but I look for a team that he ran 5 yards of carry against the Patriots defense that's allowed 5 yards to carry everyone. I've already read on record saying Kenyon Drake will run for 100 yards this week. Jim, what's your thoughts on the Lions and wide receivers?
Look, these guys, the one thing I like is that Stafford's going to throw the ball. You know it. He's going to be above 30 attempts almost every game, probably more than that in most games. So this is right now he's averaging 45 attempts a game. So as long as he continues with those kind of numbers, all 3 of these guys are over 20 targets, averaging at least 8 targets a game at the least. Tate is averaging 12. So, definitely these guys are getting their chances, and that's just going to continue. I like Kerryon Johnson. I think he's going to have some big weeks, but I don't think it's really going to deter from these wide receivers at all because, look, the one thing we do know is Stafford's going to throw the ball a lot.
Stafford loves throwing the ball a lot, and I love having him as a fantasy quarterback. And it's interesting to me. He's always one of those guys that go anywhere from 8 to 12 in fantasy drafts. Speaking of guys that don't go 8 to 12, Brian, Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco, fact or fiction, are legit QB1 options in fantasy football.
I'm going to say that's fact. If you look at what Andy Dalton's done the first 3 weeks of the season here, it's really impressive. And his schedule coming up is really good too. You know, he's found something with Tyler Boyd coming out of the slot. They have no issue throwing to the running backs. They're going to get Joe Mixon back, which only amplifies this offense more. Oh, by the way, they play the Falcons this week, who couldn't stop the three of us from going out and catching balls all over the yard. So yeah, I think Andy Dalton for sure in that Bill Lazor offense can be viable. Joe Flacco, I think you're going to ride the wave with him. You know, every week though, it seems like he's creeping up. First week, 1 touchdown, second week, 2, and 3. So this week he's got to throw 4 against the Steelers. Usually that's about a 6-3 game, but I believe in these two guys because they have something to play for and their offenses are opened up.
I'll tell you what, I believe in Andy Dalton, Jim, and I don't believe in Joe Flacco. And it's kind of crazy because I used to be a Joe Flacco guy, but it's not the same guy that got drafted.
Well, it's not the same guy that got drafted, but it is a guy that's a lot closer to that than what we've seen from him in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, he's got a 64% completion ratio. He's got the 2 touchdown average each game, only threw 2 interceptions so far. So he's playing well. But, you know, with Flacco, I just have a little less trust than I do with Dalton. And Brian brought it up, but I'm going to elaborate here. This is the next 6 weeks for Dalton's team. He goes against Atlanta, who's currently 29th against opposing quarterbacks, then Miami, who's currently 25th, then Pittsburgh, who's 31st, then Kansas City, that's 30th, then Tampa Bay, that's 28th, then New Orleans, that's 32nd. Dalton has gravy for the next 6 weeks.
Jeez, you know, it's interesting though, Jim, but don't you feel like sometimes we get too caught up in the matchups, especially if you're looking at it after 3 weeks?
No, I think now is the right time to be looking at matchups. I think the people that look at the matchups before the season starts, those are the people wasting their time because you have no idea what these defensive differences are going to do from year to year until we actually start to see it. So now we got 3 games in. We got a little bit more data. Gives us something to actually work with. So now's the absolute time I think is best to start following those matchups. And sure, he's not going to hit every one of these 6 out of the ballpark. But when you're looking at defenses that right now can't stop anybody, you got to put that as part of your knowledge base, what you take from and how you judge what these guys are worth.
All right, Brian. Now that before I go to you, Brian, now that Jim's a professional and he's on the Fantasy Sports Network every day, you guys can go check it out at fntsy.com and check out all of Jim's great work and all the guys over there. Jim, here's the hard part of what I hear you say. After 3 weeks, we can look at it. So is it after 2 too early and 4 we don't have to wait for? How did you arrive at 3 weeks?
No, I didn't arrive at 3 weeks. I'm saying right now we're starting to have enough data to where we can form an opinion. Before the season, we didn't have any data to form opinions except what we knew from last year. And that doesn't give us anything this year. So even in preseason, I was saying the strength of schedule in preseason means nothing to me.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. I can't pay any mind to it. There's nothing in there that really wants me to say, oh, I could take something from this. As the season grows and as the data grows, the more weeks we get in, the more we can tell about what's coming forward. You know, that is definitely something you have to take into account every time you're thinking about this.
Brian, this is a question I ask people all the time. Pittsburgh played a game with 2 cornerbacks out. Their 2 starting cornerbacks out, and they've only played 3 games. So are they the worst defense in the league? And how do you go about trying to figure out matchups?
Yeah, in fantasy, I think a lot of times what we do is we look at who's playing on the offensive side of the ball and we neglect the defensive side. You know, when there's a corner not playing, like in New Orleans this week, where Patrick Robinson's out and Sterling Shepard could be a guy who could really go off, we have to pay attention to that. If, you know, Muhammad Wilkerson's not in there anymore, you know, the running game is going to open up for teams going against them. We need to pay attention to these things. You know, at the end of the day, these guys are all professionals. Can anybody out there make a play? Absolutely. But we need to know who's in and who's out on these defenses, just like Atlanta. They're down 4 starters now in the secondary. That's going to be a team you're going to target your receivers against all year long.
Yeah, that's the thing, too. You got to keep track of the injuries, and Brian hit it on the head. On the defensive side, because a lot of times, Jim, especially if you're playing DFS, but it even comes in the bigger leagues when you're playing fantasy, is you got to go after the matchups. And if a guy's out, that dictates who you put in your lineup.
Oh, absolutely, Tony. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm looking at a broader stroke here, but absolutely, when you start to dig in, you want to go with those matchups and see. I'll give you a perfect example. I think Allen Robinson is a great play this week because they can't stop any slot players, or haven't in through 3 weeks stopped any slot receivers yet. I think Allen Robinson goes out and has a big game in this one.
Jim's going to make me segue into a question I had for later in the show. Jim, Allen Robinson's interesting because I look at him being far superior to everything else they have talent-wise in Chicago. And in fact, the offense, Taylor Gabriel's been on the field a ton, and he's worthy of a pickup for all you people out there. I'm shocked because I don't think he'll stand out. But can Allen Robinson be a top 20 wide receiver at the end of the year with the poor play of Mitchell Trubisky?
Yeah, that is definitely the question, whether Trubisky really starts to get it together or not. But I think so. Robinson's still seeing a ton of targets. He's going to get a ton of receptions in this offense. Whether he's going to get the touchdowns, right now we're not seeing that. I think we will see it. At some point, it will definitely come to happen, I believe. But, yeah, I'm definitely starting to have a little bit more worry about this offense than we did coming into the season. Look, this offense was highly hyped coming in. Everybody expected, myself included, expected a lot of these guys to put up good fantasy points, and it's just not coming to fruition at this point, and most of that could be laid on Trubisky's shoulders.
Oh, absolutely. Brian, what's your thoughts on Allen Robinson being a top 20 wide receiver at the end of the year based on Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback?
He's a guy that I've tried to trade for quite a few times in season-long leagues. I don't know how much you guys put into something that's kind of in vogue in these next-gen stats, and that's something they call air yards.
Yes.
Allen Robinson is actually 6th in the NFL in terms of percentage of air yards for his team, behind just like Julio, Beckham, Robert Woods is maybe a surprising guy up there. But they're throwing the ball to him, and they're actually giving him some distance down the field. It's not just little short stuff underneath. So if he can connect on a few of those passes a game, I absolutely think he can be a top 12 option. And I think he's going to score some touchdowns too, because those little guys underneath, Taylor Gabriel and Anthony Miller, I don't see them scoring a lot of touchdowns. So that's going to be his upside.
Miller's out for a while.
Right. So he's out, and those guys aren't going to score a lot. And, we'll see what they do with Burton. But, yeah, I like Allen Robinson. If I could get him on a team, I definitely think he's a high-end wide receiver too.
I'm glad Brian brought up air yards, Jim. Jim, here's the thing. Fantasy sports are getting complicated, right? We got all these Ivy League kids involved now, all these millennials that know all these big words. Everybody's subscribing to Pro Football Focus, right? I already know what happens here, folks, because I do fantasy baseball, and these geeks were involved 5 years ago. Here's the thing, Jim. People need to know which stats they don't need, and air yards seems to be one of them.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too. Look, air yards, nice stat. But, tell me how it influences me in fantasy. I've yet to hear anybody really give me a good explanation of how I can use it to determine which one I want to go for. Is it, does he have more upside because he has higher air yards? Okay, well, I can tell you he's got more upside if they just keep getting him the ball. I like Allen Robinson.
Quarterback in there.
Yeah. So, yeah, some of these stats, this used to drive me crazy because, one of the things way back when Mike Clay first came out with ADOT, average depth of target, and everybody was all over the stat. It was the newest, hottest stat in fantasy football and and look, I love Mike Clay. He's a good friend of mine, so don't take this the wrong way. But even back then, I used to say to him, okay, well, it's a nice stat. I'm glad you came up with something new and original, but tell me, how does it help me as a fantasy football owner? And most of the time, they can't. So to me, what good does that do me? Some of these guys are just so into stats that they're not watching the games.
Well, I'm not a guy who's a big stat guy. I went to a SUNY school here in upstate New York, so I obviously was not good at math with a broadcasting degree. So what I do when I see stats like this, because I suck at math, I was just telling my first grader son, pay attention in Mrs. Benz's class because you need to be smarter than daddy, and it'll probably happen next year. What I do is I look at something like this, and the guys who listen to this podcast, there are a lot of season-long players out there. And they maybe are looking, who can I trade for? Who am I undervaluing? Who's out there that I can, get on the slide? So if I'm looking at this air yards chart and I'm going to say, okay, well, Julio, I know he's good. Beckham, I know he's good. Wow. And then I see Robert Woods at 3 and Corey Davis, who I was like, oh, okay. Well, now I'm just seeing that they're involved in the offense. They're getting targets. They're getting targets deeper downfield. Now, maybe they didn't convert on those yet, but me as a fantasy owner, I can say there's opportunity here. So I'm not going to put all my eggs in that basket, but I like what I'm seeing here. And if Allen Robinson or Corey Davis is a guy that their owner isn't valuing right now, I'm going to swoop in and get him on my team for the stretch run.
But can't you tell that just from looking at the number of targets?
Well,
Usually
maybe
that gives me a good indication of if somebody's getting, 8, 9, 10 targets consistently every week. I have to assume that their numbers, even if they start out slow, will eventually come.
Well, let's look at a guy like, okay, here's the difference. Here's Saquon Barkley got a boatload of targets last week. Most of them were around the line of scrimmage, okay? And so he catches them and does whatever he does with them. Antonio Callaway, on the other hand, had 10 targets last week, only caught 4 of them and didn't really do a whole lot, but a few of those were really deep down the field. So I'm going to look at that and say, all right, his air yards are obviously better than Saquon Barkley. So, as someone who's just I'm trying to find pieces to the puzzle. And this is just one stat that's going to help. I don't believe in it fully, but anything I can do to get an edge and find somebody who can help my team is beneficial.
Jim, it just sounded like Brian said he'd rather have Callaway than Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that one out myself. Let's see. Should we take the guy who caught 4 because they threw it to him down the field, or should we take the guy who caught 14?
No. What we're trying to do is evaluate. We're trying to evaluate players to find who's that next guy who I'm going to bring into my lineup. Because you got a full roster. I'm just trying to break down how these air yards are broken down, and if they're throwing the ball to a guy more than just little dump offs and screens, I think sooner or later those are going to hit, and those are going to turn into big yardage gains. And if you're a DFS guy, that's what you want.
Brian, that's once or twice every 4 weeks. Cordarrelle Patterson will leave the Patriots in that at the end of the year. Is anyone picking up Cordarrelle Patterson?
But let's look at so I'm looking at the guys on this list, and if you're looking at who would you not want any of these guys? Julio, Beckham, Woods, Davis, Thielen, Allen Robinson, John Brown. Those are the top 7 guys. You'd want all those guys, and they're the leaders in that category. I'm not saying the category is the end all be all, but
without that, because we picked them in the first 2 rounds in every draft.
Yeah, or most of those guys. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't really, it doesn't showcase the next big thing. Look, everybody knew that, if Callahan got a shot, he would be somebody that would be a boomer bust, big play guy, because that's what we saw out of him in the preseason. I was happy to see that he had 10 targets last week, and I definitely think he's a player that's coming forward, and it had nothing to do with me looking at air yards.
Well, hey, what we're trying to do here is to each their own. If you can find some nugget that's going to help you and we can bring it to you here on this show, that's great. Find whatever you can find that's going to help you win your league, because if you find it and you get it from us, that we did our job.
See, this is what happened to me, though. Wait. 2 years ago, I got out of the business. I wasn't doing this for, whatever reasons, whatever. And I was done. I thought I was done, totally done. And I come back this year, and I got to tell you, I felt like Rip Van freaking Winkle. Because not only are there like 80 million fantasy experts on the planet right now, there's 900 million podcasts. There's 82 different channels of something other than this. And, so many new, and you can't even call them stats anymore. Now they're metrics. So there's so many new metrics that you have to know to want to play this game. You know what? You really don't. You really don't. You have to pay attention. You have to look at the stats. You have to read, and you have to follow as much news as you can from the right people, and if they're using those stats to give you the right information, then so be it. But
absolutely.
People that just rely on these stats make me crazy.
All right, here's the thing, people. We've got a podcast everybody listens to, everybody loves. So if you are a guy, a proponent of air stats, come on next week. Get a hold of Jim, myself, Brian. We'll bring you on the show. And if you can solve erectile dysfunction, we'll bring you on the show. There's a lot of fantasy guys that can't get it up anymore because they spend a lot of time on stats and in the dark. Their eyesight goes bad. So we'll help both people out, Jim. Is that okay?
That works out for me, Tony. I'm okay with that.
All right. So air stats or ED. We'll fix both of them next week. Brian, that's we try to build the show up to do big things.
Hey, That's a build up big things, long things, as long as it stays up for a long time.
There you go.
For 16 weeks, we're good.
Jim Day, Patriots running back, first-round draft pick, Sonny Michel. Is this a guy that at the season's end, people that drafted are going to win fantasy football championships?
Well, let's look. He's probably one of the few left that we can still hype because he really hasn't been on the field enough to do anything. So right now it's all speculation, all hope that, he's going to get the lion's share. He's going to be the big guy in New England now, especially with Rex Burkhead back. Can't say his name. Rex Burkhead going on the IR. So he's going to get every chance. I mean, there is nobody else but James White. And it's going to be him and James White doing most of the damage at this point. I don't care who else they bring on. They drafted this guy in the first round, something that Belichick and the Patriots don't normally do, invest this heavily in a running back. So they want to get him involved. And right now they just got all the opportunity they could get. So is he going to win championships? Hey, you know what? He's the only guy left that I could say he gives you that chance.
Ryan, every year there's a guy that's consistent on fantasy football teams, so maybe this is the guy to put you over the edge. Unfortunately, though, it's kind of a guy that gets hot in week 14, 15 that puts people in that championship game. So it's hard to tell this situation.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Sonny Michel hasn't set the world on fire here. He's played 2 games. He's rushed 24 times for 84 yards. That's in 2 weeks, and he looks bad doing it. You see him out there. He's kind of running into linemen. His receptions aren't really going anywhere, but I agree with what Jim said, and he's right on the money. Bill Belichick drafted you in the first round. He got rid of Dion Lewis. This is his cheaper Dion Lewis. He's going to run the hell out of this kid. I offered a guy this week just to show you what people think of him out there. I said, I'll give you Dion Lewis and Larry Fitzgerald for this kid. Guy said, nope, not doing it.
Really?
Yep.
Really?
Jim, I'm like, I'll overpay. Let's do it. So people out there, they're on the Sonny Michel hype train, man. They really are.
I'll go with Jim. Jim, one of the things we talk about all the time is tight ends and how people can look past the top 3. After this week's Monday night contest, is Cameron Brate a guy that should be picked up after being dropped in many leagues?
Well, it's so hard to say. I mean, O.J. Howard is just a bigger, better version, but Brate is always going to get a little something. Unfortunately, this past week it was the touchdown. So, it's going to be one of those situations where, you're never quite sure if it's going to be Howard or Brate in any given week, and that scares me.
Jameis Winston loved Cameron Brate last year. So maybe if Winston comes in, that's a guy that could really overtake Howard, because Howard looks like the guy now, doesn't he?
He does look like the guy to me. Sorry about that. He does look like the guy to me. And, he looks good doing it. So, again, it's really going to come down to, who's open at a time, and Fitzmagic is going to carry. He's just going to throw it to him.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people out there now that would look at O.J. McDuffie, Jim, and he's got big biceps and it's sticking out of his shirt, and he was known as a blocker, but now he's catching the ball and getting downfield. When you speak about looking good, nobody looks better than O.J. McDuffie. O.J. McDuffie, that was a name. Nobody looks better than O.J. Howard in the uniform, man. The guy looks like a stud.
He does look like a stud, and he's probably going to be a stud coming soon. But, he's also going to be a guy that's going to have some really good games, and a guy who doesn't have some really good games for you, like almost every single tight end in the business.
All right, now we're going to play a little who do you want? Who do you want? And I'm going to throw both guys off, and I'm not going to give them a matchup that we talked about earlier. Jim Day, Brian, Josh Allen, or Baker Mayfield? I'm going to go with you first, Brian.
I think that's Baker Mayfield all day. He's got great weapons, and he just has immensely more talent. He's got it between the ears. Why wouldn't you invest in a guy who has legitimate outside weapons? I mean, Josh Allen's throwing to, Corey Parsons out there, I think. So, no, I want nothing to do with Josh Allen.
All right, Jim, before you answer, Jim, I'm going to give everything Brian said 100%. He's truly accurate. But for all the people that say, hey, you know what, the Bills, they got lucky last week. They beat the Vikings, but they're not that good. Won't Josh Allen be playing from behind all the time? And Cleveland has a pretty good running game.
Yeah, absolutely. Buffalo will at some point once they get McCoy back too. But look, Josh Allen, it gives you that added benefit of running the ball probably a lot more than Baker will. Baker will not need to do it as much as Josh Allen will, just as he's running for his life. But as we saw last week, he gives you that ability and, can give you a touchdown or two on the ground, which as fantasy owners, we love. So, I like Baker Mayfield. I like what he brings to this team, but that team still has some issues. Njoku's got to learn to catch the ball consistently. We got to see if Mayfield has the arm to really get to where Callaway can get to, like we saw Tyrod not do last week before he got benched or got hurt, whatever you want to say. So, I think Josh Allen will grow into the quarterback portion of it. He still has Kelvin Benjamin, not the greatest, but he's a guy who can make some plays here and there. Hopefully Zay Jones comes back into it, gets a little bit more involved. And, I think playing from behind with the added benefit of rushing, maybe for a few touchdowns this year, maybe for a few 100 yards, I think Josh Allen has a really good chance to put up more fantasy numbers than Mayfield.
He's like, from years past, a poor man's Blake Bortles, essentially.
Yeah, you know what? That's a pretty good comparison. And I feel like the safe play is absolutely Mayfield. But I think it's going to be closer than people think. And I think that we're in a situation there where they're going to end up pretty close at season's end. And in fact, that's what generally happens with the quarterback position. And that's why a lot of fantasy experts say, wait to the end, because we get to the end of the season, they're all within 3 points.
Mayfield threw for 200 yards in one half. So if that shows you, what he can do, when he came out on the field, he started finding Njoku. Boom, 2 passes to him. He's taking deeper shots to Callaway. He's good.
Njoku never got another target the rest of the game. That was the first thing I noticed was he came right out and threw 2 passes to Njoku. I'm like, yeah, finally we're going to get some love for Njoku. And then he gets no more love the rest of the game.
Yeah, we'll see now that he's going to take the starters reps too in practice and is involved in the game plan. We'll see what takes off here. But good things are ahead. If you own any Cleveland Brown and you're dying on the vine, like myself, let's hope good things are ahead.
We got some questionable cuts from your roster, and I was surprised at some of these, so I'm going to ask you guys the ones I'm surprised about. Now, Robbie Anderson was the talk of the town last year, and then he got a rookie quarterback, and he had some more off-fieldy issues. Brian, could you cut Robbie Anderson at this point?
Absolutely. The guy has 10 targets. What are you doing with a guy with 10 targets? And Sam Darnold's arm just isn't really what lines up to what Robbie Anderson is. Anderson did well last year when they had whatever number of Jets quarterbacks throwing bombs down the field to him in comeback mode. And Darnold likes that short intermediate area where Quincy Enunwa lives. So frankly, he's just kind of not in Sam Darnold's eyes. He's not. So if you can find somebody better on the waiver wire, imagine there's a big Mike Adams, Tyler Boyd, Callaway. Yeah, give me those guys to the upside all day.
Jim, what's your thoughts? Robbie Anderson, you're going to cut him and pick up Callaway?
I would. Absolutely, I would at this point. Callaway got 10 targets last week. Like Brian just said, what he's gotten all year. So, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. He was in my waiver article this week that I think Robbie Anderson is a guy you can cut right now. Maybe somewhere down the line he comes back into play, but at this point he gives you absolutely nothing.
Wide receivers so deep, man. There's so many good guys on the waiver wire that you can go out and pluck week to week.
All right, Jim, I'm going to ask you 2 former first-round picks in the same question. Would you cut Larry Fitzgerald or Demaryius Thomas?
No, I'm not cutting either. Look, I still have high hopes for both, especially Fitzgerald. More so for Fitzgerald just because I definitely trust him more than Demaryius Thomas at this point. But I still have hopes for Demaryius Thomas as well. Fitz, I think now that they are going to Josh Rosen, like the same thing we saw in Cleveland, I definitely think it's going to be a boon for this offense because it can't get any worse. At this point, it just can't get any worse.
Brian, I feel bad for Demaryius Thomas's mother because since she's got out of jail, Demaryius Thomas has sucked in fantasy football. She has internet. I kind of get concerned that she has him on his team. Would you cut Demaryius Thomas or Larry Fitzgerald despite his mother being out of jail?
I own Demaryius Thomas, full disclosure, Larry Fitzgerald in a bunch of leagues. And I'll tell you straight up, I am trying to trade him 11 hours a day. I'm trying to get rid of him. To me, this is a situation where when the backup quarterback comes in, we see it all the time. What do? They find that backup receiver who they've been playing catch with on the side all year long, and that guy's Christian Kirk. And Christian Kirk went 7 for 90 this week, and he's actually the leading receiver on the team. So yeah, I'm not saying I'm going to cut Larry Fitzgerald, but I'm going to trade his ass because he has name value, and there's guys in your leagues who will jump on him just for that.
There really isn't a lot of guys that'll jump on him just for that. I've been getting asked by people all the time whether or not they should draft Fitzgerald across the board. The people definitely are thinking about it. And you know what? Christian Kirk may be that guy. I'm not saying he won't be, but at this point, I've lived with Fitzgerald for so many years now. He has helped me win so many leagues that I'm just not giving up on the guy just because of poor quarterback play. We've seen him have poor quarterback play and put up good numbers before. I just think this offense needs to change, and I think the quarterback change is a great place to start.
Jim, real quick, off topic. Who would you rather be in jail with for the night, Art Schlichter or Bill Cosby?
Well, hey, at least if you're in there with Bill, you probably get some Jell-O cups.
I actually love the pudding pops. If people out there are too young and don't remember the pudding pops, those were amazing. Brian, have you thought about being in jail with Art Schlichter or Bill Cosby?
I don't even know who the hell Art Schlichter is. Like, how old am I?
Holy crap, really?
I have no idea. No clue. Somebody in the chat room filled me in. I'm going to Google Art Schlichter. It's probably going to come back with weird porn stuff right here.
Colts quarterback.
What's that?
He was a professional quarterback for a very, very little while.
Yeah. Oh, God.
God damn it. What's wrong with you, Brian? You know who George Washington is, but you don't know who Art Schlichter is.
No, unfortunately, I'm going to Google. I will write a term paper on Art Schlichter, and I will report it to our WTF podcast fans next week.
All right,
I'll get a jersey.
Thank God. Now, I'm going to ask you guys to make the case for putting this guy on your roster as opposed to the other. Brian, tell me why you should have Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Chris Godwin on your roster over Antonio Callaway. Make the case.
Well, if you want to look at a guy who's scored 5 straight weeks, you're going to find him in Chris Godwin. And that dates back to last year. When he's on the field, he's heavily targeted. He's involved in an offense that throws the ball, as we see now, for 1,200 yards so far through 3 games. So if you want a guy in fantasy football who's going to score points for you and is going to be in the end zone and be targeted deep and not just some little dink and dunk slot receiver, then yeah, go pick up Chris Godwin, because last time I checked, points win in fantasy football, and he's scoring them.
Jim, go with Callaway for me and make the points.
Well, hey, look, Callaway is just getting going right now. He hasn't really gotten to that point where he's really doing the damage we expect him to do. But now that Baker Mayfield is in, hey, it was Brian who just said he loves Baker Mayfield going forward. Callaway is going to be a big recipient of that. Sure, he's only got 15 targets so far to Godwin's 20 targets. Godwin has scored a touchdown in each week, no doubt. But how long can he keep that up? That's the problem. He's already shot his load. It's time to go with Callaway, who hasn't shot anything yet. And plus, if you look at their matchups going forward, Callaway has some great games coming up. Gets Chargers, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Denver. These are all defenses right now that aren't stopping anybody through the air. And while that may change as we go through the season, and some guys come back being healthy, other guys start to play better. But right now, that's what we're looking at. The future is bright for Callaway. Godwin, not so much, because, there's still an outside chance that one of these days he's going to wake up looking up to Jameis Winston again. And that just scares the hell out of me.
All right. So it's interesting. Jim used the word shot a load, and I have to be the judge here with all the Supreme Court talk that's going on. So in Mr. Kavanaugh's fate, I will only look at the law, and I will decide this by the law. And here's the thing. I like Godwin. He's a better player, better talent. He does not catch the ball well, though. He does have several drops, but Terrell Owens was the second best receiver in the history of football on yards, and he dropped the most balls in football. I got to go with Godwin here over there. And Jim, even though you used the shot the load and you get points with that, I'm going to have to say that Brian wins this one.
The jury is rigged.
Well, people have been saying that for a while. Now we got Tyler Boyd and Mike Williams. I'm going to make the case for Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd was amazing. Last week, he was $3,700 in DraftKings. Every wise guy in the DFS industry told people to play Tyler Boyd based on the number of looks that he was getting in that Bengals offense, based on the number of plays. I believe going into last week's game, he was played one less play than A.J. Green on the field. And when Green got injured, he surpassed A.J. Green in the number of plays. Tyler Boyd is the guy in that offense that Andy Dalton loves. A.J. Green's beat up. Tyler Boyd is going to continue to go off. If you get him off the waiver wire, you got to steal.
Well, you know what? Mike Williams is the guy. Tyler Boyd is a nice little distraction for right now. But Mike Williams is the guy. This guy was drafted very early in last year's draft for a reason. He's a playmaker. He's going to just continue to get better and better and better each and every week. And we've seen that so far. You know, had the first week, didn't do anything first half, came out in the second half, 5 for 81. Second week, scores early on. Team goes out to a blowout, and he doesn't really get involved much after that. Okay, so we don't really see that happening a lot for the Chargers this year, so I'm not really going to temper that. But then comes out last week, has a great game, scores 2 touchdowns. He's got 15 targets on the year, caught 11 of them for 189 yards. Look, this kid is just going to get better and better and better, and I guarantee you by year's end, Mike Williams is going to be somebody we're talking about as a top 12 wide receiver next year, outdistancing Keenan Allen.
So I guess I have to make the call here, huh, between the two of them. Again, full disclosure, I made a trade for Tyler Boyd last night. Boy, now looking at the two guys,
the Dodgers are really not in my damn favor today.
Well, here, and I know you've been a big fan of Mike Williams for a long time, Taz. But if I'm going to put a guy in my lineup every single week, I think being the number 2 target on the team and having the guy ahead of him be gimpy, I think I'm going to go with Tyler Boyd. To me, Big Mike is kind of just their tight end. And if my microphone could stop messing up here for all the money I paid for it, I'd appreciate that. But yeah, I'm going to go with Tyler Boyd. I really like what I'm seeing out of him. Great route runner out of Pittsburgh. And I think week in and week out, he's going to be more consistent for your lineup as maybe your wide receiver 3.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jim is going to be the judge of this. Brian, Nyheim Hines, and Theo Riddick. Brian, shout us what your feelings are on Mr. Hines.
All right, so if you're playing Nyheim Hines, chances are your team sucks and you drafted poorly, okay? So you're rolling out Nyheim Hines. All right, so here's what's going on with Nyheim Hines. It's got to be a full point PPR, okay? And it's got to be a week where the Rams or excuse me, the Colts are going to be behind. To be honest, I'd rather have Theo Riddick too. I can't even make a good case for Nyheim Hines out there. He's getting snaps, he's playing, and he's getting a few targets. But I'm gonna default to this one, Taz, and I'll give you the win. I'd rather have Theo Riddick too.
Here's the thing with Theo Riddick. You look at it, everybody thought the Lions were going to try to develop a running game, which they try to do. But let's be honest, they've only ran against the New England Patriots, who have let up 5 yards a carry to everyone. So Theo Riddick is still going to be that guy that gets 70 catches in that offense, and he's going to get a couple runs. LeGarrette Blount has not done anything there. So even when they have the lead, the Lions can't turn the ball over to Blount, or they won't. Theo Riddick, man, he's the guy.
Well, you know what? Let me just throw a little something in here, and I agree with you. I would take Theo Riddick over Hines as well, so I will go that way. But I will say this, Hines definitely has more increased value with the fact that Andrew Luck is throwing for 5 and 6 yard passes as opposed to throwing it down the field like he did before the shoulder injury. So he definitely has increased value, especially now with Jack Doyle possibly missing a few weeks, maybe more, some are saying, in that offense. So I think Hines definitely has increased value. I put him along the same lines as a Jalen Richard, somebody in a PPR league that you could stash on your bench, that in a bye week or an injury, filler type of role, who could be put in and get you, maybe 9-10 points on a given week, maybe a couple more. So I'm not saying he's going to be a breaker to anybody, but at the same time, his value is increasing.
All right, Jim and Brian, I'll let one of you guys take over at Fantasy Football Talk on Facebook. Jim asked the question this week. Who is your big surprise, or what's your big prognostication for Week 4 in fantasy football? And Jim, people were chiming in.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. This group is just getting freaking huge. Way too big for me. I'm gonna have to get some other people involved here soon. But we're up over 1,500 members now, and it's going crazy. And I'm trying to find that thread, and that's just one of the things. I mean, there's so many new threads every day that it's so hard to find some of these things sometimes. I'm gonna have to start tacking them up to the top like everything else. Come on, really? I can't find it. Anybody finding this thing? Come on, talk, guys, while I find this. Give me a minute.
I went out and bought a new iPhone today. I was one of those idiots that got suckered in, and I just realized that my Facebook page is set up to my college email account. I graduated college 18 years ago, so yeah, that I can't get into that anymore. So I got to try to find a new way to sneak backdoor into Facebook. But yeah, the guys they're loving it on there. Every time I log on to Facebook, I see that page blowing up, and people are asking really good questions, and that's what it's all about. We got a lot of guys here in the chat room too asking good questions. If you guys want to hear any of those,
yeah, absolutely, get them involved. I'm still having a hard time finding this.
Okay, so who'd you rather play this week? We'll call it PPR. John Brown or Kenny Stills?
Kenny Stills has a big upside against the New England Patriots defense, which has been worse against the run in the past, but it doesn't mean they haven't let up a lot in the past. I'm going Kenny Stills, and I'm going with the upside.
Yeah, I don't know. John Brown's just been getting it done. No doubt about it. He's playing better than I thought he would, and Pittsburgh is again tough against the pass right now. They're 30th against opposing wide receivers. Have given up 6 passing touchdowns already. Of course, most of that was KC and Tampa Bay. Not so much Cleveland week 1, but definitely 6 touchdowns, almost 650 yards through the air through 3 games to wide receivers alone. So that that's definitely not something to really think nothing of. I mean, they're just not getting it done. They should be a little tougher at home, getting a little bit more healthy, maybe, but it's just not the same defense. So I think I would go with John Brown here in a game where I think Flacco's going to have to throw a lot to keep up with big men at home.
Our friend Dylan Moore here in the chat room is bringing up a name we haven't spoken about yet today, and that's Josh Gordon. And he's asking, in a half-point PPR, would you play Marvin Jones or Josh Gordon?
Oh, Marvin Jones.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I would go with Marvin Jones. Look, I want to see Gordon in this offense at least once before I'm ready to say anything about it.
Josh Gordon looks really good outside of uniform, and that's what we're accustomed to seeing him. He's a big man, and he's thin, and he probably looks fast. But I need to see him in uniform, Jim. He looks very good outside of his uniform.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I agree. I want to see him on the field before I'm ready to put him in there.
All right. I love these questions. So we've got a little roster management question here with a trade. Our friend Jason asks, I'm trying to dump Amari Cooper while I can, and I could use another running back. I got offered Royce Freeman. Should I take it? So he's getting Royce Freeman and giving away Amari Cooper. Jim, what do you think? Is that a good move?
I would say yes. I'm not a Cooper guy. I don't like Cooper. Never liked Cooper. Wouldn't draft him. Haven't drafted him in a couple of years. He's so inconsistent. It makes me nuts. I would take Freeman just with the chance that there is still a chance that he ends up taking the lion's share of this offense. Philip Lindsay is a small guy. Maybe he can't live up to this kind of role week in and week out. We just don't know yet. So, yeah, I think, most of the time I'm going to take a running back over a wide receiver. Like you said earlier, wide receivers are so deep that you could usually find somebody on the waiver wire that could do you well. And like we're seeing this week, there's plenty of guys on the waiver wire that I would start over Amari Cooper at this point. I am just not a fan.
I don't get to see his whole roster, so it makes it a little tough. But anytime I can get a running back that I think has the upside of Freeman and being a guy that could control that job, I think absolutely. I think when you look at the Lindsey situation in Denver, yeah, he's playing. Yeah, he's a guy that's got a little spunk. Yeah, he's from Denver. Everybody's rooting for him. But we all rooted for Tattoo on Fantasy Island, right? And he was a little midget. And what happened was we became politically correct and we couldn't use the word midget anymore. And we had to use little people. And then once we started using little people, Vince McMahon took the midgets out of WWE. And now the midgets are unemployed. So I think the same thing might happen with Lindsay.
As a guy wearing a CM Punk t-shirt, I can appreciate the Vince McMahon reference. Now, you guys have been doing this a lot longer than I have, obviously, and I'm sure you get your Twitter feed blown up with questions like this. And I don't know how you respond, so I'm curious of what you guys say back to a follower who asks this. When they just say, rest of season, Hogan or Ridley? What do you say?
I'm going to tell him right now. What I tell him, and I'm told everybody this week, I said I couldn't get off the Hogan bandwagon quick enough. Look, it got Gordon now. You know, it just I got Edelman coming back next week. Just at this point, I don't think Hogan has much of a role going forward, and I would make that move in a heartbeat.
I'll tell you what, I watch Alabama a lot because I live close to the University of Florida, and everybody hates Nick Saban. And I don't have any allegiance, so I just root for Nick Saban because everybody else hates him. I can't understand how Calvin Ridley got passed up so much in the draft. And he's starting to show that it was because of a bad 40 time. And a lot of times people get away from playing football in 40 times. I love Calvin Ridley. There's no comparison to the talent between these two players. To me, it's Calvin Ridley.
Let's see. Let's see if I can find any other fun stuff in here. We're talking Kenny Still. Last one from the chat room here. A lot of John Brown talk here today. Did we do John Brown and Kenny Still? We did that. Here's another question I see right here. The guy had straight up trade in a full PPR. What side would you rather be on? Imagine all things are equal. Devonta Freeman or Doug Baldwin?
I'm going to go with the running back. They're both banged up. They're both offense. When you look at the Seattle offense, I don't know what's going on there. The offensive line's poor again this year. Doug Baldwin looks like a shell of his former self. I'm going to go with the running back and Freeman coming back.
Yeah. Wait, you said two running backs? No, you said two wide receivers, didn't you?
No, Doug Baldwin and Devonta Freeman.
Oh, Doug Baldwin and Devonta Freeman. You know what? I'm going to go with Baldwin. There's a good chance when Freeman comes back, he may not even be the number one anymore. This team, has come out and said, I don't think that's true, though. That's probably just garbage coach speak, just trying to get some people going on. Freeman will be good for what he is. Coleman is still going to dig into what he gets each and every week. I didn't like him coming into this season as much as most did, so I didn't draft very much of him. So I think I'm going to take Baldwin when he comes back because let's face it, right now, Russell Wilson needs Baldwin on the field. There's no doubt about it. Atlanta doesn't need Freeman on the field.
Interesting, because someone offered that trade to me, so I wanted you guys to make the decision for me. I'm so torn. I don't know what to do.
I would take Baldwin. I just would. It is what it is, but and it's hard to get starting running back. So if you went that way, I couldn't fault you for it. But I think I'd want Baldwin because I think Russell Wilson is just chomping at the bit to get Baldwin back on the field and make him relevant again.
Cool. Thank you so much to all the guys in the chat room and on the Facebook page who hit us up with questions every week. We appreciate it.
Okay, now I couldn't believe how long it really took me to find this thread here. This is crazy. Next week I'll definitely have to pin it to the top, but I finally found it. It was like 3/4 of the way down, and that was like last post was maybe 2.5 hours ago. So that's crazy how fast the posts are coming. Okay, so here's some of the better bold predictions for week 4. Eddie Marion Garula says the Browns will win 2 in a row, and Baker will throw for 300 yards and 3 TDs. What do you guys think of that one?
It's pretty spot on.
And today, you know what? At first, I'm saying it's not bold. I mean, Cleveland's going to be in this game. But when it took 650 days to win one game, I guess it is bold. I think he's on the money as well.
Okay, let's see. Another one goes, Mendo Bruce wants to say that the 49ers trade for Le'Veon Bell. Could you see the 49ers trading for Le'Veon Bell? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me when they need a quarterback, not really a running back at this point.
I don't see them doing that right now, just for the fact that they paid Jerick McKinnon a ton of money and they lost their quarterback, so they're obviously not going anywhere this year. I know that contract with McKinnon, there are some outs in it after a year or two. And plus, who would you rather have anyways between those two? Give me a break. But I can't see them pulling that trigger now. There's no point.
I actually think that if a trade did happen, which I don't think it will, I think it's going to be one of these things that are going to play out, that the team is going to be the San Francisco 49ers or the Cleveland Browns. We're talking about two teams that are in the bottom third in payroll in the National Football League. You're talking about a guy that turned down $14.5 million. You're going to need money. So I think it's going to be limited to Cleveland, Indianapolis, or San Francisco.
Now, there you go. And here's another one from Eddie Angus. He says, Mayfield has a huge game, and Tyrod Taylor becomes the new 49ers QB.
Well, I like the guy there. I like Beathard. When he had a chance to play, he did pretty well. I don't think Tyrod Taylor would be an upgrade.
Here's the thing with CJ Beathard, for all you fans out there who think the season's over with 49ers guys. If you look at last season when he played and this preseason, there was no quarterback in the NFL who targeted running backs more than CJ Beathard. So if Matt Breida is in there, he's going to get targets and have some value. And Kyle Juszczyk, if you're in a 38-team fullback special league, could have some value because he's going to be out there playing. So I don't think the world is falling on Matt Breida owners as much as they might think. So yeah, is he great? No, but you know, it's not the end of the world.
Here's another one from I don't know, I can't read his name, but he says Kenyon Drake rushes for 100 yards. I mean, Brian, do you think that's even possible from Kenyon Drake at this time?
I mean, what did he rush for last week? 7. So yeah, but you know what? This is the NFL. The Cleveland Browns are winning games. The Buffalo Bills are winning games on the road. Absolutely. You know what? 200 yards. Mark it down. Let's get real bold.
So here's the thing: is that
oh wait, yeah, that I can read the name now. That was from Tony Sincata.
New England Patriots are letting up 5 yards a carry. If Miami goes out, Miami's been putting the ball up. They've been Ryan Tannehill has played well, but the way to beat the Patriots is on the ground. I'm interested to see if they let Kenyon Drake run it, or we're going to see Frank Gore get 12 touches that will eliminate Kenyon Drake. But if you're a Drake owner, this week is the week to put him out there. Don't worry about last week's 7 carries, 7 yards. I think this is the week he goes off.
Well, but everybody's waiting for him, especially my co-host on the Football Frenzy, Chris. He definitely loves Kenyon Drake. He's waiting for him to hit those big numbers. So I'm sure he's looking forward to that. Here, let's see. Alex Fleming says the Bears beat the Bucks. A star is born in Christian Kirk. Watson wakes up. Tyreek goes off again. Eli throws 3 picks. Ekeler takes over for an injured Melvin Gordon. He's just trying to hedge his bets here and grab a little bit of everything.
I love all those except Eli Manning's 3. I think Eli has a great week, and you can even use him in daily fantasy.
I will be using Eli. Nice stack with a little bit of both of those teams in here. Here's my bold prediction for the week. I think between Eli and Drew Brees, they throw for 8 touchdowns this week.
Oh, I'm with you. I don't think you're far off.
And I'll piggyback on that with mine. Sterling Shepard goes for $140 and a touchdown.
Yeah, definitely love to see him get involved last week again. I think with Ingram out, that definitely plays more into his hands than anybody else's. Really gets him back involved. He's another guy I like this week a lot with Ingram going to be out, probably miss a few weeks. Look, I like Ellison. He'll get a few catches here and there because Eli likes to throw to the tight end, and Ellison does a pretty good job when he has to play. He doesn't drop a lot of balls. He doesn't fumble when he does have it. So he'll make some plays and he'll put up points, but Shepard is definitely going to be the biggest recipient of Ingram going out, in my opinion.
That's very, very interesting, Jim. Very, very interesting.
And why is that, Tony?
You know, life is full of crazy situations, right? And I'm looking at this. The Cleveland Browns and the Indianapolis Colts are $55 million and $52 million under the salary cap, respectively. The next team's $32 million, the San Francisco 49ers. If you're a fan of the Browns and Colts, you should stay home because your team doesn't care about winning because they're putting all the money in the Colts and Browns owners' pockets. Because they could not sell a ticket and they'll still make money based on how much they're spending on salary.
I think that the Colts, though, and they had the worst GM in football in Ryan Grigson for a long time. I think the team that they're putting on the field now is vastly improved over what they had the last 2 seasons. They could do more. I mean, it's tough to get worse or better than, it's easier to get out of the gutter, but I think they're doing okay. The Browns have a nice, talented roster, but what it's going to come down to is you're going to see free agents now that want to come play with Baker Mayfield, just like you saw with people saying, "Oh, we want to go play with Wentz," and now guys want to play with Jared Goff. So once he's there and he establishes himself, you're going to see some big name free agents say like, "Yo, I'm going to go play with this kid."
Yeah, but see, the problem is they're going to say, "Damn, I want to play with that kid," but when are you getting rid of that damn coach?
Oh God, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Right, Jim. And here's the other thing where you're 100% wrong, Brian. Nobody wants to live in Cleveland with all that money, because you still want to go out at night. You're 22 years old. You want to be in LA. You want to be in Miami, and they don't care if they win or lose.
That, you know what? That's an interesting point. I live 2 hours from Buffalo, and the Bills can't keep a free agent to save their lives. The second those kids' contracts are up, they're out the door. So you know what? You got me there. If I was 22 years old and I could go anywhere else, I'd be like, yo, the Cardinals suck, but I'll go hang out in Phoenix. Let's go.
And, and a lot of times that does come into play. We can't say it doesn't. They want to go where they're going to go have some fun and stuff. And you know what? I can't say any different. If it was me at that age making that kind of money, I'd probably be the same way, guys. I was a little bit of a wild guy when I was younger. Hence the nickname Taz, where it came from, was being a little wild every once in a while.
Yeah, I don't see Odell Beckham going to Cleveland.
His boy Jarvis Landry's there. I don't know.
That's a good point, though. He does like Jarvis. Those two guys are, really, really good friends. So that would be interesting. All of a sudden, it starts to be like the NBA. Hey, come over here. We'll all win together.
We haven't figured out if Jarvis likes it, though. He's been there 3 weeks.
We'll see if they can take a picture on a yacht in Lake Erie somewhere.
You're a little cold by then, but we'll see what happens.
I don't know, guys. Well, thanks. We went a little over again, but we started a little late, so I guess that makes up for it. Brian, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
You can find me at Drake Fantasy on Twitter. You can also check out some of my writing over at Fighting Chance Fantasy. And I want to throw one thing out, if I could. If a sleeper of the week early waiver wire pickup, he just came back to practice today. If you're dying at tight end, go out there and you got a roster spot, pick up Hayden Hurst, first-round draft pick of the Baltimore Ravens. Super talented guy. If you're really struggling there, throw him into your bench, see what happens the next couple weeks down the road. Your boy Brian told you.
I'd rather have Dallas Goedert.
Well, Hayden Hurst is from Jacksonville, Florida. So
that means you can't take him, right? Because you're from Jacksonville.
We like having him there.
Jim, the problem with Hurst for me is like you got 4 or 5, 8.
Yeah, they have a lot of good tight ends.
Well, that's because he got hurt, though. I mean, from everything I read, he was having a really good summer, and he's way more talented.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's not talented. He is absolutely a talented kid, but even his teammates in preseason were saying he wasn't tough enough. He needed to grow a tough exterior. He backed off a little too often that they liked. And you know what? I don't like to hear that about a tight end. I wanted a super aggressive, nasty, pain in the ass tight end. Like, Shockey was always a favorite to me because he just didn't care. He just went out there and bowled people over. That's the kind of tight end I want.
I think that's the problem is most of these tight ends now are just glorified wide receivers. They don't want to block anybody.
Jim, you sound like you'd rather prefer Kellen Winslow masturbating in parking lots.
Well, as long as I don't have to see him, I don't care. It's okay by me. He can do it wherever he wants. Him and, a bunch of those guys can get together. There's a few of them, those Hollywood types that like to do that kind of stuff. They can all form a club.
Brian, just for the listeners out there, if they don't know where to find me, they're not paying attention. So move on.
I will say, though, that I just got told I'm starting a new show this Saturday on the Fantasy Sports Network on the radio side, the weekend fantasy update with Joe Galena every Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern time, again at the Fantasy Sports Network on the radio side. So, come listen in. We'll have a lot of fun. Joe's a great guy, very knowledgeable, and I'm sure we'll work well together.
Just whooped his ass in the Fighting Chance Fantasy League, too.
Oh, there you go.
Joe Galena, absolutely one of the best guys in the business, and that'll be a great show with Jim and Joe.
Congratulations.
Okay. Oh, thanks. They just keep throwing me into more and more shows only because I'm the cheapest one they got. But that's okay. I'll take over the world anyway.
Jim, you're the anti-Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, there you go. I'll work for chump change and bananas. I'm okay with that. As long as all I have to do is talk. It's when I got to get into that writing crap that's not so much. So once again, folks, don't forget, check out Fighting Chance Fantasy. Brian and I both right there, Fantasy Sports Network. And of course, this is the WTF Fantasy Football Podcast every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern, hopefully at 9 o'clock next week on time instead of having technical difficulties. Thank you, Google Hangouts. We appreciate that. And we will see you then. So everybody have a good luck this week. Enjoy week 4. We're out. We'll talk to you in week 5.